Welcome to the McElhaney Report. I'm Bill McElhaney. On this show, we cover current issues of the day, but always from a viewpoint or perspective rarely aired by the mass media. We hope you'll find it interesting. Since 1989, the world has been told that the Soviet Union collapsed and that, except for several countries, communism is dead and the U.S. won the Cold War. The truth, the reality, is quite the reverse. Everything we have witnessed since 1989 has been a massive and successful, multi-decade-long deception strategy on the part of the KGB, the Soviet secret police. The goal? To deceive the West and achieve the goal of Leninist strategy, a totalitarian world government or international police state. We know this from the evidence provided by Anatoliy Golitsyn, the most important defector from the KGB who came to America in 1961. In 1980, he wrote a book, New Lies for Old, that was published in 1984, which described the disinformation strategy and made specific predictions as to what the KGB would do in subsequent years, such as removing the Berlin Wall, changing the name of the KGB itself and other structures in the Soviet hierarchy, and also the role to be played by Mikhail Gorbachev. An independent analysis of these predictions years later showed that over 94% of them came true by 1991 and since then. That's how we know Golitsyn was telling the truth, and quite correct. Our guest today, who first appeared on this show in 1995, is uniquely qualified to expose this conspiratorial strategy. Based in London, he publishes 10 newsletters and reviews on economic, financial, and political intelligence, including Soviet Analyst. These invaluable periodicals incorporate the understanding of post-1989 events provided by Anatoly Golitsyn. He's published Golitsyn's second book, Perestroika Deception. He's also published Joseph Douglas's Red Cocaine on the Soviet strategy of using drugs to sabotage the West. And he's published a very important book, the European Union Collective, on the regional world government now in place over both Europe and Britain. I am so happy to welcome back to the McElhaney Report my valuable friend and colleague, Christopher Story. So glad to have you here.
Delighted to be here.
Now, for those people who are just learning about Anatoly Golitsyn, we need to emphasize that the understanding he provided about the strategy of which he was a part in the early 1959 to 61 period, in forming this strategy in the KGB hierarchy. This multi-decade strategy means that nothing really has changed in the Soviet Union and the other satellite East Bloc communist states that call themselves democratic republics today. Nothing has changed except deception, appearance, and propaganda. And let's go over some examples of that. Don't we have the same KGB-led bureaucracy with different names on the doors?
Absolutely. The KGB remains the same. It's divided itself into several parts, but this is by no means the first time this has happened. It's happened about 5 or 6 times since 1917. But Golitsyn's great achievement was to make Lenin understandable, because actually all that Golitsyn did in his 2 books, New Lies for Old and the Perestroika Deception, is to explain Lenin's mind. And these people actually are in Lenin's mind. They're out of their own minds and they're in Lenin's mind, which is not a very nice place to be.
Also, the system of some 1,700 concentration camps that comprise the Soviet Gulag prison house of territory, with millions and millions of political prisoners. All of those concentration camps are still there, but never discussed by the media, which since 1989 has told us that communism's gone out of business.
A few years ago, I was privileged to receive a list of these concentration camps from a very reliable source. And this list contained the actual street addresses, I mean, so to speak, and the locations of these concentration camps. And these included a number of new camps which had been set up under the so-called, quote-unquote, non-communist government of Boris Yeltsin, which in fact was a continuation by other means, which we'll come to. Now, when I published this in Soviet Analyst, I thought this has got to be, a really interesting story. I sent it to the whole of the Western media that I could think of, the English-speaking world. Not a trace, no response at all. However, there have been a number of open references to this which have appeared almost as if by accident in articles in The Guardian and elsewhere, which, of course, I and others collect. And when you put these things together, you get actually a very interesting picture. There's been no change at all.
Okay, not only has there been no change in the Soviet concentration camp system, but in their massive military buildup, their worldwide espionage activities within Western nations, the subversion and sabotage they wage, particularly the area of sabotage called drug trafficking.
Basically, in 1961, the Soviets relaunched or launched a long-range strategy, which is what Golitsyn talks about in his two books. I should say, perhaps, that the Communist Party of the Soviet Union has had 4 programs since it started, only 4 party programs. The first was 1903, the second was after the revolution, 1917. The third party program is that which Golitsyn speaks about and writes about in his 2 books, the third party program.
Which would be from 1961 onward.
From 1961 to 1986, when Gorbachev is 85, Gorbachev arrives as General Secretary in 85, and at the 27th Party Congress in 1986, he launches the 4th party program. We'll come to that in a minute. The purpose of the long-range strategy, which was actually announced by the head of the KGB in 1959, they prepared this strategy, and then when they had worked out how they were going to deceive the West in what has turned out to be the biggest deception operation in the history of mankind, to be honest, when they worked this out, they convened a conference called the 81 Party Congress, which took place on one day, on the 6th of December 1961. And these, consisting of 81 parties from all over the world, communist parties, and the long-range strategy was rubber-stamped, and that was it. And from 1961 to the arrival of Gorbachev was the period when they were preparing for the implementation of what Gorbachev subsequently introduced. Now, I'd just like to say here something very important, which is that sometimes people say, why was there such a long period from the introduction of the third party program to the introduction of the fourth party program? And the answer to that is extremely interesting. It is that in 1949 or 1948, the Western Allies agreed with the Soviet Union, i.e. with Stalin, that Germany was to be occupied for a period of 40 years. 49 to 89 takes you to the pulling down of the Berlin Wall, and on cue, quick as a flash, they start pulling down the wall at the end of the 40-year period. So what do they do during this extended period? Now,